and then I'm going to get everything started. I believe it's recording now. If it's not, well, we'll figure it out. Welcome. I've lost track of how many of these classes we've done, but this is the second class, courtesy of Alessandro Padovani, the lead instructor for the Liberal Gun Club. My name is Ed Gardner. I'm the executive director. With me tonight, helping manage the group, is Eric Myers and Michael Ross. And if you guys have been to any of these classes before, you've seen and heard their names. Alessandro's going to talk about the fundamentals of concealed carry tonight. This is not legal advice. He's going to reiterate that, but he is going to talk about some of the fundamentals, some of the techniques, and a lot of sort of the general things that might appear in our defensive shooting class, which you'll be able to take once we're all out of quarantine. Without further ado, Alessandro, it is your show. Go nuts.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. If there is a few of you here from last week's class, the fundamental home defense, this kind of dovetails in, from that class into fundamental concealed carry. So if you need to defend yourself outside the house, if you're in a public space. Let's set up a little bit of the context, first and foremost, and then from the context, we can extrapolate what are the best tactics, techniques, to train. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment that we may choose to get to carry our firearm with us outside of the house. Basically, the context would be a close quarter threat that is beyond two-arm reach, meaning, if I draw my gun and I get to full extension, the bad guy is not going to be able to grab my gun, so it needs to be outside of two arms reach, right? If I go sideways, right, if this is the bad guy and I go with my gun here, he can grab it and prevent me from using it appropriately. When we're talking about within two-arm reach, it's a different set of skills that we need to work, and they deal a lot more with close-quarter combat, the hand-to-hand fighting, so that I can gain enough of an advantage to then go for my gun, and so that's a different class. For now, the context is a little threat outside of two arms reach that I need to address with my firearm. It's gonna basically integrate a multiple round string of fire to stop that threat. We don't know how many rounds it's going to take to stop a threat, so we train always to vary our pattern, shoot 2 to 5 rounds each time when we are trading. And this is so that we don't get locked into a double tap mentality where, I shoot 2 rounds and then I wait to see what happened to the bad guy. And if the bad guy is not down, now I'm wasting time to put 2 more rounds, right? So the idea is a consistent string of fire while remaining combat accurate until the threat stops. The other skill that we didn't look at during the home defense is presentation from the holster. And not just presentation from the holster, but presentation from the holster, while dealing with a covered garment, right? So those are all differences that we need to address, explain, and figure out how to best train. So the goal for the fundamental concealed carry is to prepare the student for the most likely use of a defensive firearm in a public space, right? The most likely use would be a dynamic critical incident. Now, a dynamic critical incident is an event that is surprising, right? We didn't know it was going to happen. If you're going to the ATM and we knew that somebody was going to rob us, we probably wouldn't go to the ATM, right? It's important to understand the value of this statement for our training regimen. If something is surprising, it's a dangerous stimulus that get introduced surprisingly, that jumpstarts our body natural reaction in front of danger, right? And we know that we get that startle flinch response, right? Hands come up in a protective manner between the stimulus and your command center, if you will, right? So if it's a dog, the hands are gonna come up right here. If somebody that is facing me and they're coming at me with a hammer or with something, that's gonna be pretty much my startle flinch, right? The startle flinch happens while the brain thinks about what to do next, right? So it's a default reaction that we have in front of danger. Other things that happen when we are facing a threat in that manner is that we lower our center of gravity, right? Again, we lower our center of gravity, we bend at the knees, we bend at the hips. Then we go back here. So if you see the profile, right, this is what happens when we get started, right? When you were playing hide and seek with your cousin and it goes boo, that's what you do. Now, the reason why we lower our center of gravity is because of the fight or flight response, right? We have all heard about that. So in order to fight back or fly, run away, we need to have our hips engaged and our body ready to move, right? Incidentally, when I bend at the knees, I bend at the hips, and I put a gun in my hand and I go to full extension, this is also one of the most efficient shooting stance that we can use to mitigate recoil. So this is the surprising part of the dynamic recoil incident. The dynamic recoil incident is also chaotic, meaning that I don't know what's going to happen next, right? Let's say you're confronted by one or two bad guys, right? One bad guy goes and draws a knife. He draws a knife, I move laterally, I get my gun out, I draw my gun, and I may have to engage the first guy, right? But what happens to the second guy, right? Do I know for a fact that he's going to stay there? Do I know for a fact that he's not going to run away, move, change angle, drop his weapon and surrender, right? So if I don't know what's going to happen next, right, this is important to understand how silly it is to prepare for defensive engagement with choreographed drills, meaning drills that I know exactly what's going to happen next, right? When you have a drill that goes at the bib, you're going to take 2 shots eye center chest, 1 shot at the head on this target, and 2 shots center chest on that target. Your brain's already prepping the neurological pathways to deliver those actions. It's already sending blood to the right muscle groups to deliver those actions, and we take away what is the most important aspect of the defensive engagement, the information processes that we need to do before deciding when, who, and how to shoot, right? So when we just train with choreographed drills, we're not really preparing for the reality of a confrontation, when we need to first realize what's happening and then find the most appropriate response to what's happening. So it's a surprising event, it's chaotic, and it presents us with a level of threat that we deem necessary to respond to with our firearm. So it's a little level of threat, right? This is the context of this class. What this class doesn't deal with is how to get your CCW in your state or in your county. The law regarding the use of lethal force for self-defense, because those vary from state to state as well, right? So those things are your responsibility as the student, as the person that wants to get their CCW, to find out and to follow, right? Here we are going to talk about technique, tactics, equipment, and best training methodology to prepare for a dynamic recoil incident. All right. Incidentally, if you guys want to take notes, I put them here so that, you know, as I speak, you can take notes, or if you can see this, you know, there's something to that may help you to take notes so that you can go back and you know, think about it, see if you have any questions and so on and so forth. Now, there is a couple of skills that we need to talk about that are very pertinent to the concealed carry person, right? First one is awareness. We also need to talk about awareness in a realistic manner, right? Awareness has become this kind of like mythical thing, you know, in the tactical world, where, like, you know, I'm aware all the time, I always see it happening, I'm always ready, I'm always prepared, right? That is obviously a fallacy of the ego, right? Awareness is a skill. So as any other skill is limited, right? I can be more aware of something, which means I'm less aware of something else, right? Let's say that awareness, you have $1 worth of awareness that you can use, right, on any given moment. So if I see somebody like that, you know, raise a red flag, I may use 70 cents of that awareness to figure out what's happening over there, which means that I only have 30 cents, right, to control everything else. That's not necessarily realistic. I'll give you another example. Like when I go to my car at night in the parking lot or whatever, I'm always trying to look around, right? just because I want to see what's coming my way. Now, that's being aware. What happened is I'm walking down, my phone rings, and is my wife on the phone who's just been in a car accident. What is my awareness going to be then, right? I can have a freaking clown jumping in front of me with a gorilla on his back, and I'm still not going to see it because my mental focus is here, right? So awareness is an important skill that we need to practice, we need to use, but we also need to understand its limitations, right? Because otherwise we develop a false sense of security, and we're not going to be as ready to respond to a surprising threat as we could. So awareness is important because it can allow us to recognize danger beforehand and avoid it. And it's a very good tool that helps us be deselected as potential victims. Because as we know, predators go for the easy victim, right? Because they know, they have the experience, they can recognize that. So if you're walking around, right, get down and just on your phone and so on versus walking around, and you can still be on your phone, right? But you can, if you're walking around and you're looking around, the predator may see that as a sign that you would be better prepared to respond. And so they may deselect you as a possible victim, right? So as we mentioned, avoidance, the main positive aspect is that can help us recognize dangers a little bit sooner so that we can have more options to avoid that danger, right? By avoidance, we mean, if I see somebody that raises a red flag over there, maybe I'll go back into the office and ask somebody to walk me back to the car. Maybe I go back to the restaurant and ask somebody to, if I can stay a little longer, if they can call an Uber or whatever, right? But it gives you options, right? So avoiding a threat is something that we should endeavor to do. And particularly if we have a gun on us, we have a duty to avoid confrontation. We may not be able to avoid a threat, but we definitely can avoid a confrontation, particularly if it's based on ego or silly, arguments and things of that nature, right? Understand that if you're carrying a gun, any argument that you start, there is a firearm involved, right? So avoidance may mean swallowing a little bit of pride, right? Saying yes and apologizing for things that you may not feel that you should. But again, if I can avoid by de-escalating a situation, that's going to be beneficial for me, right? Because remember that nothing good comes out of having to use a handgun to defend yourself, except that you're surviving that event, right? But afterwards, you need to survive the legal, the civil, the moral, the ethical, and the financial burden that a situation like that may bring upon you, right? So again, discretion and maturity can help us a lot on this subject. Now, when we talk about de-escalation, right? Obviously, it can be verbal, right? So we can use our verbal skills to mitigate, to calm people down. There are different options that we can use, right? There is active listening. There is things like, using humor, like using deflection, like agreeing, like, teaming up. Like it's kind of like there are different strategies we can use verbally to mitigate a situation and try to control it and de-escalate and bring it back down, right? Obviously, we go a bit more in depth during the class. We don't have too much time to see everything in detail here, right? The attitude of de-escalation can be physical. I can just decide to create space, right? Walking away. The driving principle there is that I can try to avoid danger and can try to de-escalate danger as long as it doesn't put me in more jeopardy, right? Let's say you behind the camera are the bad guy, right? And I'm deciding, you know what, I don't want to tell you this. And I turn to leave. Obviously, that opens me up to a much more dangerous attack, right? So I need to keep everything into consideration because your driving principle should be to avoid violence at all costs. Pardon me, not at all costs, right? To avoid violence as much as possible. But when violence becomes the only option, you need to be able to take it. This brings us to a little concept. Rob just posted a little bit about that, you know, the should versus could, right? A lot of people, particularly when they're new to concealed carry, to the law regulating self-defense, the use of a firearm, lethal force for self-defense, you know, when can I shoot the bad guy, right? Now, it's not necessarily about when can you, right? Because the law may offer you more leeway, right, than your morals may, what's the word I'm looking for, may agree with, right? So let's say, and I'll give you a silly example, right? Let's say that the person that is giving you trouble, like, is an 8-year-old guy with a hammer in his hand that is coming to you like this, right? Now, in some states, if I were to follow the letter of the law, I could draw my handgun and shoot this person, right? And it would be legally justified. But now, if I have a different course of action, like this is an 8-year-old guy, right? I may run away, he's never gonna catch me. I may just, you know, verbally address him. I may actually go hands-on if I go have any hands-on skills because of the situation, because of this fighting force and so on, right? So just because I can, it doesn't mean that I should, right? We can go back and give you an example that is more pertinent to the home defense, right? How many people you hear that end up shooting either a loved one, a neighbor, a friend of a loved one in their home at night because they hear a big noise and they go looking for the bad guy. And when they see the bad guy, instead of making sure that they recognize the target, like they're sure of their target, what's in front, what's behind, all that jazz, they just see the shot and they engage, right? Now, legally, that could be justified, but morally, probably not, right? So there is a lot about that. Let's not get, you know, the fact that you're carrying a gun doesn't make you a cop. You have no duty to detain. You have no duty to intervene, right? You carry a gun to defend yourself or a loved one from grievous bodily harm or death, right? You can also choose to engage, you know, a bad guy to defend a third party, but you need to be extremely sure of what's going on before you actually do that, right? Because if you just happen on a situation, you didn't see it start, you didn't, you know, you may not be focused on the right things that allow you to make the best decision possible, right? Now, keeping all that in mind, it becomes important also to talk about alternative force options, right? For a couple of reasons. Even if I have a CCW, some places I cannot take a gun. Even if I have a CCW, you know, I may not always have the gun on me, right? And so, and most importantly, because not every threat that I face necessitates a lethal response, right? So, as well as my firearm, I may choose to carry a few other things, right? We can talk about pepper spray, right? We can talk about tasers, right? So just to give you an idea, so we talk about pepper spray. There's like a Kimber blaster, pepper blaster, what have you. So this is one of my favorite because it actually has a little pyrotechnic charge behind each cartridge here. There's a safety, you press the safety in, and then you can access the trigger, right? It has 2 shots, right? And this shoots a cloud of pepper spray 90 miles an hour all the way out to 13 feet. But the advantages of this is that I don't need to be up close and personal, so I can control, I can mitigate the cross-contamination effects, and I can engage somebody farther away than contact distance, right? So it's pretty advantageous. They sell training ones as well with inert liquid inside, so you can see the pattern, you can see how it works for you. It's pretty intuitive, right? As I'm pointing it out, you know, where my finger is pointing, that's where this thing goes. You can have a little holster for it. So that's another force options that doesn't rise up to the level of lethal. Another one is like a taser. So this is one of the 2 civilian version tasers that you know, have a good price point, around $350. And the advantage is you have a safety, you disengage the safety. Now you have a light and a laser, right? And if you press, it shoots out. Let me put it back on safety so I don't, shock my laptop. But basically, you point it out, right? You press it, the two barbs comes out just like a police taser. They hit the person, and hopefully, unless something goes wrong, the person goes down and stays down. The difference between civilian and police, the police taser has a 5 seconds ride. The civilian taser is a 30-second ride. So ideally, the thought behind it is you hit the person, drop it, run away, you got 30 seconds to get away. The other advantage is that if the wires don't work, I can still use it on contact. It becomes a stun gun, right? So it gives an advantage also for multiple assailants. So another thing that we need to be honest about is the fact that if you choose to carry a gun for self-defense, you may want to look into some empty-hand skills as well, right? Again, not all threats necessitate your gun. You may have to fight to get to your gun, right? You may engage the first person, and then his partner jumps on you to get the gun away from you, right? So we need to be honest. The gun is not a talisman that keeps you safe. The gun is a tool. If you don't have the skills to use the tool, it's not going to help you. If you don't have the skills to defend yourself without that tool, your ability to defend yourself and your loved one are going to be seriously limited, right? Because if you're traveling by plane, you don't have a gun on you, right? If you go to the post office, you go to the certain buildings, right? If you go on vacation abroad, right? So we need to be honest and understand that we need to invest sometimes in some physical training for hand-to-hand as well. It's not going to hurt you, right? And it definitely can be extremely advantageous. But at the same token, we need to be honest and understand that we need to have a little athleticism on our side. And by athleticism, I don't mean fitness, right? I don't need to run a mile in 4 minutes. I don't need to be like a CrossFit aficionado, but I need to be able to freaking run for a block. I need to be able to move, to push, right? Somebody if I need to. Obviously, we have limitations, right? We have range of motion issues. We have physical issues that we can get over it. As we age, we're going to be less and less able to keep up a good physical regimen, right? But it's important to understand that if you can, you should. Lastly, one of the things that I see most often is people going to take a CCW class, get the certification, get the paperwork, and then never show up for class again, which keeps them non-confident in their skills, which makes them not carry their gun in public because they're insecure. They're not confident about their self-efficacy with a handgun. So if you go through the expenses of getting your permit, getting a gun, train enough so that you're confident to carry the gun on you, loaded with a round in the chamber, because that's how you're going to need it if you need to use it, right? So I really beg of you, like, rather than focus on which gun, like, this, which holster, which this, which that, let's focus on getting good with whatever gun you choose, good enough so that you're confident to carry and keep it with you as much as possible. Any questions so far? All right.
No questions. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I figure. Now, having said that, let's quickly go through. Oh, and I forgot to do all these, by the way, so that you guys can get some of the notes. Oh yeah. So a quick thing that I usually teach for all my self-defense classes, right? Again, with the could versus should, right? Use the gun and whatnot. It behooves you to get a personal directive down. Think about it, write it down. Personal directive that allows you, it gives you permission to use violence where violence is needed. And if you can frame it in a way that jives with your ethical, moral, religious beliefs and the legal aspect of it, it's going to be even better. Just as an example, I'll give you mine. In order to protect my loved ones and myself, I'm willing and able to use all the skills at my disposal in order to stop the threat with the least amount of violence necessary, right? If we break that down, motivation first, right? To protect my loved ones and myself. This is what drives me. This is what gives me the motivation to actually act. I'm willing and able to use all the skills at my disposal. All the skills meaning from awareness, avoidance, de-escalation, to empty hands, to less lethal, to knife, gun, truck, rock, hammer, whatever, right? All the skills at my disposal to stop the threat with the least amount of violence necessary. So the least amount of violence necessary is decided by the bad guy. The bad guy decides how much violence I need to use to stop it. If verbal is enough and it is engaged, awesome. If that's not enough and it escalates, then I need to escalate as well, right? So figure out what works best for you, but I can defend a statement against my moral beliefs, against ethics. It drives with the law about self-defense and force continuum. And so if something were to happen, I don't need to be deciding at the time how far I can take it or not. I already have a preset philosophy that helps me drive my actions. Therefore, I can get to my actions quicker, more efficiently. All right. Having said that, let's go back to quickly talk about what we got here. What are the parameters for selecting a gun for concealed carry? Like if you were here last week, you know that what we use to suggest, of our most efficient guns is the fact that they need to be objectively efficient, right? Meaning that objectively, a gun can be more or less complex or more or less complicated, right? Let's talk about the difference between complex and complicated. Complex requires multiple actions, all of which are necessary to achieve my goal, right? Complicated meaning it's an action that requires multiple steps, some of which are unnecessary. A Glock, just because we're talking about striker fire, or MMP or a striker fire gun, right, is complex because when you activate the trigger, there is a multiple steps that happens, but each step is necessary for the function of the gun, right? I disengage the safety, press the trigger back, and that starts the spring and all that, right? A double action, single action gun, right, is complicated because in order to achieve my goal, put a round on the bad guy, I have a longer pull, a shorter pull. The hammer goes back and goes forward. I may need to cock it, decock it, put it back on safety, take it out of safety. So I can achieve the same goal, but it's definitely less efficient, right? It's going to take me more, not just to achieve that goal, but also to train to become proficient. Because the more steps I have, the more resource I need to devote to train, right? So objectively efficient. We again suggest striker fire because the bore axis is lower, which allows me to manage recoil better, right? They're usually pretty reliable. Again, because they have less complication in the mechanism, and they have a consistent trigger pull, right? So these are the advantages of a modern striker fire versus a double action, single action only, single action only, and all that jazz, right? Now, when we talk about concealed carry, we need also to figure size into that equation, right? When we're talking about home defense, I don't have to carry the gun around, so I can get the bigger, gun that I can fit my hands well, and that will help me with accuracy if I have the longer barrel, and with recoil management, longer barrel, heavier gun, and so on and so forth. But now, if I need to carry the gun around with me, I may choose to mitigate and compromise, and maybe choose a smaller gun so that it's easier to conceal. But at the same time, I don't want to compromise enough that the gun is so small that I'm not really able to manipulate it efficiently, right? All the micro 9mm and so on, they can work depending on your size, hands, and so on and so forth. If you're talking about striker fire microgun, they work more easily than striker fire guns with safety and all that things, because again, it's a small gun and small safety are really hard to manipulate, particularly under stress. Right? So keep that in mind when you consider which gun to get for your concealed carry. Cost, of course, is always a factor for most of us, so you might have to mitigate, that and put into the equation as well. There's a couple of other things that we suggest you may carry with you when you're carrying your gun for CCW, right? Cell phone, which, is kind of a mood suggestion because most people don't go anywhere without a cell phone. Handheld flashlight, right? Even if you have a light on your gun, a handheld flashlight will allow you to look for bad guys without muzzling anybody that doesn't need to get muzzled, right? And again, that may help you to get deselected. If I'm walking toward my car, it's a dark parking lot, there's a dark corner, I don't mind grabbing my light, just flash it there a little bit. What happens? There's nothing there. If there is a bad guy in the area, figure out that I'm a little bit more aware than the average person, may deselect me as a potential victim, right? Not to mention that you can get a pretty solid handheld flashlight, and you can also use it as a last-ditch defensive tool, right? And then you have your cell phone, you have your flashlight. You may want to consider carry a trauma kit with you, right? And particularly nowadays, that you can have trauma kit on your ankle, at all times, super light, and you get a tourniquet, gloves, shears, chest seals, gauze, compression bandage, and an emergency blanket. And this can be on you at all times, right? And this you can use for car accidents. I've had clients use it on car accidents, on shooting victims, and it's something that we actually may have a much higher opportunity to use than a firearm, right? But this is like so that you can get a 360-degree, like a holistic approach to concealed carry for self-defense, right? It's not just about the gun, it's about your physical skills, about your hand-to-hand skills. It's about your ability to, de-escalate the situation verbally, and so on and so forth, right? Good. Let me see. Talk about the gun selection. Now we can talk about holster selection, right? So holster selection vary a little bit also by where you choose to keep your gear, right? If you bring, strong side hip, appendix, small of the back, right? So when we talk about holster, these are like just the holster that I have at home. So, I'm not endorsing, just giving different topology, right? So outside the waistband, meaning that once you thread this through your belt, and it stays on the outside, right? The advantages of outside the waistband is that it's a little bit more comfortable, but also, obviously, it prints a little more. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to conceal, depending on your wardrobe, depending on where you live, season, and all that, right? In the same position on the strong side hip, I could have an inside the waistband holster, right? And this will go inside the waistband. It is going to be way easier to conceal. And incidentally, this is a Stealth Gear USA, one of the most comfortable strong side holsters ever. They have a little bit of a padding, a bit of a rigid, chassis in it. So it distributes the pressures really well, and it's perforated, so it breathes quite well as well. Then let's say we have, obviously people that may not be able to dress for the concealed carry, right? But may not be able to keep their shirt outside their pants, or they may be wearing like, more elegant clothes, or yoga pants or workout, right? So even in those situations, you can actually manage to carry comfortably by using the appropriate equipment. So one of the first things is like just inside the waistband holster with a ulti clip. So this little clip, right, actually clips on the cloth, right, on the waistband or whatever gym clothes you have, right? And so you can keep it there. It's very well concealed, and it stays where it needs to be, right? Obviously, if you choose to wear like that, you may choose a subcombat gun and so on and so forth, and size the holster appropriately. Another option, both for working out clothes, elegant clothes, or suit and jacket, is a belly band, right? So essentially, this is the crossbreed belly band. Yeah. So you can, it comes with a detachable rigid holster that you can attach anywhere on this Velcro, right? Whether you carry appendix, whether you carry appendix on front side, you can regulate it. This one in particular has a couple of extra pockets, right? Where you can put either a spare magazine or medical equipment or handcuffs if you're law enforcement. But so this you can wear it like at belt line, right? Inside the weapon, of course. You could also wear it above the belt, right? Depending on the clothes that you're wearing, and you're still able to access your gun and keep it concealed if you're wearing something that is a bit more flowy. Whatever holster you choose, remember that it needs to meet 3 criteria, right? It needs to cover the trigger and the trigger guard, right? Because again, when we go to get the gun, we don't want to have that index finger accessing the trigger before we're ready to. You need to basically have it in the same position. It needs to keep the gun in the same position on your body, right? So you can always go back to the same spot. The gun doesn't go around, doesn't move around, and that increased my efficiency in presentation from the holster. And it needs to balance security, both covering the trigger and keeping the gun in, right, with ease of access, right? So if you have a retention thing, and you screw it down too much, the gun is not going to fly out. But if you need to jump up to get it out, again, it's not the best idea, right? So you need to have the best compromise between security and efficiency in the draw.
Al, if there's a question from the audience,
yeah.
If you could speak, please, to the option of pocket carry, pro or con.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're getting there in a second. Well, actually, let's get there now. So there is other options that people consider, right? There is pocket carry, there is ankle carry, there is shoulder carry. In particular, if you were watching any action movies in the 90s. And there is cross draw, right? So let's talk about pocket carry, right? Pocket carry is become very fashionable, if you will, because you can have a small gun in your pocket and you forget about it, right? Now, the problem is, let's say this is the gun that I choose to pocket carry, because this is pretty much the size of the same, right? It's so fun and game, right? When I'm standing up and I can actually access this, right? And come out pretty easily, right? Now, what happens when I'm sitting down and my hips are closed, right? I cannot freaking access the gun in my pocket, right? What happens when I'm driving? What happens if I'm fighting with somebody? And now when I'm fighting, again, my hips closed so that they'll get toppled, right? And when my hips are closed, I'm gonna have a much harder time getting in there and getting the gun out, right? So although it's quite comfortable, I really stay away from pocket carry. For those specific reasons. Even for a spare magazine, I don't want my spare magazine in my pocket, man. What if I'm behind cover? Now I'm sitting down, squatting down. Now I need to like move and to access that. I think the advantages, the comfort, does not justify the disadvantages of being stuck in a fight without being able to access my firearm or my spare magazine. Similar thing for ankle carry. Ankle carry, if you carry a small gun, can be very comfortable. The problem is that now to get my gun, I need to go down one way or the other or bring the gun up. But now I'm either bringing my head down or bringing my leg up, which doesn't make me better at fighting. Excuse me. And so the benefit of having out of the way, having it there, versus the risk of not being able to access it efficiently when I need it to. Kind of relegate ankle carry for a secondary weapon if you choose to carry a spare, right? But not for your primary. Now, let's go back to shoulder holster, right? Shoulder also may make a lot of sense if you're spending a lot of time driving, right? Because again, it's not here. Here it's kind of easier to access. We don't allow shoulder holster training on our range because, you know, if I grab my gun from here, I'm muzzling myself and I'm muzzling anybody on that side, right? So those are the limitations for training and safety. The other we're talking about was cross draw, right? Again, cross draw, when you have your gun on the opposite side, right? It makes a lot of sense if you're driving a lot, right? Because you're sitting down, you can access a bit more easy than here, depending also on your body type and so on. But again, we don't allow that in training because there is too much leeway, you know, for the muzzle to be pointed at things that are not safe to be pointed at. Lastly, off-body carry, right? A handbag, one of those tactical little backpacks that you need to like, zip, grab it, looks cool as hell, right? But how much longer is it going to take you to present that weapon, right? And if you're walking around with a gun in a bag, it's because you could have that gun on you, and so it makes more sense to have it on you. Now, the caveat there is a lot of women prefer to carry in a handbag because of dress style, because of maybe they perceive themselves as being too, like, you know, too small or too, you know, frail, or, you know, it prints, you know, it's easy to print and so on. So I carry on the handbag. Now, again, I strongly advise against that. I'd rather you go with a smaller gun on you than with a bigger gun on the handbag, because what happens? If a predator doesn't want your life once you stop, handbag is the first thing they're gonna grab. If I see you walking down the street, right, and I want to assault you, I may just grab the strap of the handbag, carry, you know, bring you down, or I may assault you, and now you're in the fight with the handbag going all over the place. How are you going to reach it, right? Remember, a purpose of the holster is to keep the gun indexed in the same spot on your body as much as possible, right? So the off-body carry kind of defeats that completely. Again, the only argument that I ever heard about the advantage of these other positions is comfort. I don't want to sacrifice efficiency for comfort, right? It doesn't make sense to me. Is that covering the alternative carry methods? I'll go as a yes.
Oh, no, only because it's come up now. Bra carry.
Which one?
Bra. You're not particularly
Yes.
qualified to talk about bras, but
yeah.
bra carry.
So the you know, and there is a couple of companies that are, you know, more obviously tailored for women shooters, right? And the bra carry, now the bra carry, what I can't really speak too much about the comfort of it and so on, because obviously you know, it's not something that I use. But from talking to other women instructors and so on and so forth, you know, it can be comfortable, but the thing is, you have a muzzle pointed at your chin, right? When you go to grab the gun, it's soft, so the trigger is not covered as much as possible. But, you know, I apart from that safety issues, I don't have enough, you know, to let you know how efficient that is, right? It keeps in the same spot, covers the trigger, you know, so you could go under and grab it. They also sell corsets, you know, that might be a little bit more comfortable, and they keep the gun pointed, you know, down instead of up. So again, frankly, you know, you may want to inquire to instructors that are female and have a much better understanding of those.
I'm gonna go ahead and bet. Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Cheers. All right, so when we talk about on-body carry positions, right, there are two that we suggest, right? One is appendix, you know, center line. So basically, either side of your buckle, right? If you're right-handed or if you're left-handed, right? Or strong side hip, right? We kind of don't particularly like this one because, so the limitation of this one is, again, if I'm driving, may not be the most comfortable. if I'm in a fight, if I fall down and I fall on that, may not be the best for my lower back. And there's been a lot of situations where that happened, actually. Right? On top of it, if I need to go for my gun, this is a little bit longer than here or here, right? So again, if that's how you carry a son, I'm not here to tell you don't do it. I'm just giving you the pros and cons as we've seen them, and then you make up your own mind, right? But particularly when we move and forward, we do our training for outside of 2 arms reach. Now we get into asynchronous quarter tactics when we need to be within 2 arms reach, so we need to fight off the attacker and get to our gun. We see that this opens my shoulder up, opens myself up. It can open me up to a worse attack from the bad guy than here or just here, right? The appendix is actually the most efficient way to be able to defend your gun and to access your gun in the time of need, right? All right. Any question on equipment, positioning, anything like that? Four, three, two, one. All right.
You're good.
Now, let's talk a little bit about counter-ambush methodology, right? Our training methodology, the methodology that we base all our courses, whether it is empty hand, gun, rifle, carbine, knife, and whatnot. Right?
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
So we've talked about the various ways to carry. Do you have any preference in material? Leather, Kydex?
Good question. So I think Kydex is kind of my favorite material just because it's a really good compromise between effectiveness and cost. The main issue that I have with leather is or soft holster and so on, is that over a period of time, particularly if it's not the best quality, right, the edges kind of fold in, right? And so when you put the gun in, the edge catches and it activates the trigger as you reholster, right? So as long as the mouth of the holster stays open and is rigid, I don't really care what kind of material you use. When this part doesn't stay open, that's where the opportunity for an negligent discharge for an accident to happen arises. They also have a lot of hybrid where kind of like this one, right, where part of it is Kydex and part of it is either this material or is leather. Those they work really well. You have to be careful though, because sometimes this part, the guard for the slide, starts to bend, and that too may become a safety issue, right? So as long as you check it, and as long as the mouth of the holster stays open, the material is really not very important, in my opinion. All right. So let's get back to the counter-ambush methodology, right? So the main difference between our philosophy and our training regimen and the traditional ones are that we don't start from a position of, oh, I know what's going to happen. I know what I need to do. I'm ready, able, and that's what I'm going to do, right? We start from the worst case scenario, the ambush, right? I'm out with my family. I'm out with my wife. We're trying to figure out if you want to go to this restaurant or that restaurant, and now all of a sudden there is a shooting happening, right? So remember that surprising event, right, that we talked about, the dynamic critical incident? So the importance there is because first I need to recognize what's happening. Is that somebody shooting? Is a car backfiring, right? And then, as I react to that noxious stimulus, in this case, let's say gunshot, right? As I orient towards it, right? First is my attention, that is my body. Because the brain wants to figure out as much as possible about the threat to figure out what the most appropriate response is, right? And then once I recognize the threat, I apply my most appropriate response, which it might be move laterally, draw my gun and engage the threat, right? Or it might be grab my wife and run to cover, right? So the main difference that we integrate information processing in the training, right? Because that's what's going to happen. We're out and about. We're not expecting. We're not on a mission to go get a bad guy, right? We're not law enforcement, not military. We're just going about our life. And now we need to go from, oh, crap, to do something that is appropriate. So our goal in counter-ambush methodology is to train the students for rapid information processing and decision-making while applying complex motor skills under a tremendous amount of stress. That's the goal, right? So the main thing is that information processing. The quicker you process the information, the quicker you can come to your most appropriate response, right? And so that's why when we are on the range, when we start with the live fire, once we go past the fundamentals, you're gonna have 2 or 3 commands to have to filter through to decide which target to shoot, right? And then those commands will become 5, 6, 7, 8. So now you need to discriminate. You need to understand, process, and apply, right? Instead of just beep, and you already know what to do, right? So that's the main difference between our training methodology and other training methodologies, right? So everything, all the drills are based on this filter, if you will. Now, when we talk about skills, right? We start with the fundamentals. So grip, full extension, shooting stance, and all that. So to briefly talk about that, right? Just so everybody can see, no ammo here. And this is the yellow flag that would prevent any other round to get in, right?
Confirmed.
Thank you very much. And I'm not a lawyer.
But you are a range safety officer.
So we talk about grip, right? And again, if you guys were here last week, you may have seen, but there's some new students, so we'll revisit it quickly. When I grip my gun, I want to grip it properly. So I want to have the webbing between my thumb and index as I up on the back strap, right? If you see there, there's no space. If I have it here, right? With that space, when I shoot the gun can jump a lot more than if I'm all the way up, right? So as high as possible on the back strap, these 3 fingers wrap around with the middle finger touching the trigger guard. My trigger finger is splayed and is resting on the seam between the slide and the frame. This gives me a tactile feedback for where my finger is at all times, right? We don't want the finger resting on the trigger guard because under stress, we may get a grasp reflex, meaning when we are startled, we want to clamp down on what we have in our hands. So if I have a grasp reflex here, I can still access my trigger. If it's here, I have a much difficult time accessing our trigger, right? So that's why we want it on the seam, possibly, between the frame and the slide. Gives you tactile feedback, right? So these 3 fingers wrapped around, touching the trigger guard. The thumb is splayed as high as possible. This, incidentally, allows me a perfect fit with the fat part of my thumb right here. Thumb splayed. These 4 fingers go to wrap around parallel to the 3 fingers underneath, touching the trigger guard as well. My thumbs are up and splayed on the slide, right? So these allow me to hold the gun as high as possible and with no space, no dead space in between. So when I go out and I shoot the gun, in this way I can manage recoil a little bit more efficiently because the higher up on the gun I am, the more I can contrast the action of the rounds going off, right? Same thing here, a little detail, especially for new shooters. I can have my thumbs here as I'm shooting and nothing's gonna happen to the thumb, right? We see new shooters starting to shoot and then, leaving the thumb open because, if you don't know, you may think that the slide is gonna cut into you, right? That's not gonna happen. You can shoot by pressing on the slide. It's called the slide for a reason, okay? So that's for the grip. Now, it goes without saying that I want to achieve that grip when I go for my gun, right? So if I go for my gun, I want to get a proper grip right away, right? I don't want to grab it a certain way and then have to manipulate the gun, right? Because it's not a given they're going to be able to acquire a 20 grip, right? I may be shooting here. I may, hold somebody's a loved one and so on. I may be, fighting somebody else. So I need to be able to grab the gun one time and be able to use it. When we talk about grip, then we want to talk about the shooting stance, right? Our shooting stance is a matter of convenience, in the sense, if I can get my perfect shooting stance, right, I'm gonna be here, right? My knees are a little bent, my hips bent forward, I get to full extension, right? And here, I can manage recoil as best as possible, because not only my muscles are tight, engaged, and they're contrasting the recoil, but my skeletal structure is locked behind the gun, right? The difference between this, standing up straight, bent elbows, I need to use my muscle a lot more than anything else to mitigate that, right? Straighten up your elbow. Now the elbows are locked, right? So I can control this better. If I lean forward, now I also have the mass of my body behind that gun, right? When you see people on the range standing up straight and they start shooting, the gun starts to go up and they start to go back, right? If you lean forward quite athletically, lean forward behind the gun, you're going to be able to manage the recoil a lot more efficiently.
Flip your chart.
What's that?
Flip your chart.
Thank you very much. You're gonna get a body. Yeah.
I figured you already ran ahead, so.
Yeah. Way ahead of you guys. All right. Let's talk about two concepts. Defensive accuracy, which we touched upon last week, but we're gonna revisit, and then defensive efficiency. Defensive accuracy, we define any rounds that significantly affects the target ability to present a lethal threat. What we mean by that? Let's take the two extremes of this, right? A guy comes, gets out of the car with a baseball bat, and they're coming for me, right? And I'm like, oh crap! I move lateral, engage, and because I didn't train and so on, boom! I let a shot go, doesn't hit the guy. The guy sees the gun, sees the shot go, drops the bat, and runs away. So that is combat accurate, right? That's defensive accurate. Any shot that significantly affects the target ability to present a lethal threat. Right? Obviously, that's not the level of skills that we want to strive for, right? It's just an example. The other side of it is, now this guy, I'm talking to somebody, this guy jumps me, we're on the ground, and now he's holding his knife, to my throat, and I'm here. So now the only shot that is going to significantly affect his ability to present a lethal threat is a shot to the head, right? So again, it's the bad guy's action that determine our level of application of skills sometimes, right? So that's the concept. How it translates in real life. In real life, it translates in the fact that we define a defensive accurate area on the target, right, as the high center chest. On the threat, on a human threat, again, is the high center chest, right? And it's a 360 degrees. If the bad guy is threatening you, it's going to be orienting towards you, right? So it's going to be facing you. Hips and shoulder are towards the danger, if you will, right? But if the bad guy is threatening your loved one, he may be just presenting this side, right? He may be just giving you his back. So we need to understand that that defensive accurate area works in a 360 degree angle, right? The other, even more important aspect is the fact that any shot here, we consider it as effective as any other shot here, right? What I mean by that is that, would you rather get shot here? Would you rather get shot here? Would you rather get shot here, right? Then people say, well, I want to get shot, I'd rather not get shot here because that's the heart, right? But what if the guy is like this, right? So maybe the shot there is actually just going to graze. So we cannot really judge our combat effectiveness on a two-dimensional paper target, right? So any shot here is equivalent to any other shot in this area. Meaning that now I don't need to do the smallest group possible to stop the threat, right? I just need to put enough rounds to damage the threat enough to stop it, right? And what I mean by that is the application of resources, right? I don't need to be as accurate as I can be. I can be with with enough time and so on. I can be shooting 5 rounds here, and each round touches the edge of the other, right? That's gonna take me like 10 seconds. I don't want that. I prefer to shoot like maybe 4 rounds over here in a second than 4 rounds over here in a second and a half or 2 seconds, right? Because these 4 rounds stand a better chance to stop the threat sooner than this. Does that make sense? If it does, we also need to understand that at defensive shooting distances, right? We don't always need to use our sights in order to achieve combat accurate hits, right? Because we know that the body orients toward the threat, right? So if you're my threat over there and you're threatening me, and I go, oh crap, here, right? When I go to full extension, right? My gun is inside and parallel with my line of sight. So meaning that where I'm looking, the muzzle is pointed. So if I have a decent trigger press, right? I can achieve combat defensive accurate hits without having to slow down, go look for the sides, and then start shooting. And it's not because it's something that I want to do, it's because it's something that my body will do instinctively during a dynamic critical incident. We're going to be focusing on the threat. There's an increased blood flow to the part of the eye that focuses on the center field of vision because the brain wants to capture as much information, right? So instead of trying to fight that, which is not possible, right? We want to work with it and understand that unless there is a higher demand for precision, I can engage a threat effectively using kinesthetic alignment, both eyes open and focus on the threat. Kinesthetic alignment is that, right? Arms locked, the gun is inside and parallel with my line of sight, right? So inside and parallel versus parallel but not inside.
Take one step forward. One step forward, please. Take one step forward and do it again.
So here I'm looking at the E, right? I'm focusing on that. My gun is inside and parallel. So now if I switch to my side, I know that I see that my sights are exactly on that, right? Why? Because I'm focused on that, and I bring the gun inside and parallel with my line of sight. Here, it would be parallel but not inside, so I would be shooting lower than where I'm looking. Here, it's inside, but it may not be parallel, so I may be shooting lower or high, right? So that's why I want to develop a proper kinesthetic alignment, proper grip, so that that's a consistent, right? And once it's consistent, I know that at 3 to 9 feet, which is 85% of civilian defensive engagement, I can achieve defensive accurate hits more efficiently by not having to slow down, look at the sides, and then start up again. Any question on this concept? Because it's a little bit different from like the front side focus always. So and it's not different because we want to be different. It's different because the front side focus doesn't happen in the time of stress.
I did have one question about, and I think you addressed it when you talked about the 85% of the events are going to happen in this way, but shooting from the ground, shooting from rolling out of bed, shooting from when you're not standing up with proper kinesthetic alignment.
Yes. So as we mentioned, shooting stance is a matter of convenience, right? If I'm training and so on, I get my proper shooting stance, right? So my hands are my hip, my feet are hip width apart, right? Bend in the knees. One foot can be a little bit forward or the other, right? Bend at the hips, gun in and parallel. So that's my perfect, most comfortable shooting stance. But now I'm down on the ground, right? So I'm on my knees, right? The only thing that doesn't change is the gun in and parallel with my line of sight, right? Whether I'm sitting down, so now let's say I'm on the ground, now you're only gonna see this, right? But that is the thing that I cannot change outside of 200 reach. This is the constant that allows you to obtain defensive accurate hits more efficiently while focused on the threat. The moment that I start to bend this, now the gun is not in and parallel with my line of sight. I don't know where the muzzle is in relation to where I'm looking, right? That's why when you see waiver, when you see different shooting stance, they need to use the sides because they're not kinesthetically aligned in and parallel with the line of sight. That cover that?
Yep. Thank you. We've drawn on 10 minutes past the hour, and folks are starting to drop off. So,
Dude, time flies. We we have so much more to see. All right,
do
so
more, but go on.
I'll quickly go over some of the things that we need to integrate in the concealed carry training, right? So the first thing, like we talk about defensive accuracy. Now, defensive efficiency is any action that significantly affects the target ability to present a lethal threat, right? So by action, I mean maybe assessing our environment after we engage will significantly diminish the next threat ability to present a lethal threat because we say it can. Moving laterally upon presentation, as you can tell, may help me because it buys me a little time, right? Remember, in a defensive situation, the bad guy's action, you decide when, how hard to attack you. You are reaction, right? So if I'm reacting, I'm already behind the curve. By moving laterally, I can throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in the bad guy's plan, so now he has to address my movement, right? Lateral movement, we define it with 3 Ds, right? Direction is perpendicular to the threat, right? If you're my threat and I move back, it's not going to really change much. Right? If you have a firearm, yeah, I'm like, 1% smaller. If I move forward, again, sometimes it calls for moving forward on the empty hand stuff, but with a gun, I don't need to move forward because that 3 feet difference is not really going to make me more or less accurate, right? I want to move perpendicular to the threat so that if it's a gun and I'm perpendicular, the guy needs to track my movement. If it's a contact weapon and I'm moving perpendicular, I get off the X, right? So now I can have more time to draw engage and I'm not getting hit in the head. Distance is at least 1 body width, right? But this is lateral movement, but if you're hitting me with a hammer, you're gonna hit me here instead of here. It's not ideal. So I wanna be at least 1 body width, right? So now I'm not where you were shooting, I'm not where you were hitting, right? And the third D is duration. I wanna start to move laterally from the moment that I recognize the need to shoot and the moment that I'm ready to shoot. Meaning, I recognize the need to shoot, I move laterally. Here, when I'm at full extension ready to shoot, I can stop, right? But if I'm wearing concealment and so on, I may have to take a few steps before I'm actually ready to shoot, right? So the reason being, we start moving, that guy tracks. When we're ready to shoot, we plan because we're more accurate when we are standing still and engaging, right? And not only that, but the way the eye tracks, the bad guy is following your movement. If you stop suddenly, it's going to over travel and then have to come back, right? So it gives her a couple more advantages. Obviously, I need to train so that my lateral movement presentation from the holster doesn't slow me down, right? If I can present from the holster here in a second, I need to be able to present from the holster in a second while moving laterally. Otherwise, the advantage I get is not really going to be beneficial because it slows my presentation from the holster. Cool. Now, assessing our environment. That is another one of those, defensive efficient skills. Assessing our environment, we need to understand that it's both a physical skill and a cognitive skill, right? When I'm assessing my environment, so I engage the bad guy, right? Multiple string of fire, I'm here. Now I'm looking around. It's physical because I actually need to turn in order to be able to check 360 degrees. But it's cognitive because I need to actually have my brain switched on and figure out what's happening around me, right? In training, we tell students, when you're assessing, see what another student is doing. Pick up something, right? Somebody may be reloading. Somebody may have a malfunction. Somebody may still be shooting, right? Somebody may be walking back for water. Like engage the brain, not just like the super cool, super fast scan that doesn't allow you to see anything, right? So when we are assessing our environment, we're kind of assessing, we're looking for a few things, right? First and foremost, any other threats, right, in the environment. Secondarily, we're looking for law enforcement, security, maybe not a CCW, right? So first we look for people that we still need to shoot. Then we need for people that we don't want them to shoot us, right? Because they perceive us as a threat. Then we're looking for people that may need our help, particularly if I'm with my loved ones, right? They've been shot. Is there somebody there that I can help? I do have my medical gear on so that I can help either a loved one or somebody else, right? As I'm doing that, I may also check myself, right? We know that under adrenaline and so on, people may get stabbed, hit, shot, and they don't realize until they, a little time pass or until they see blood, right? So as I'm checking for everything else, let's check myself too. Let's check that the gun is in battery, that I still have rounds in the gun, right? Oftentimes we have students doing their assessment with the gun as LILO, right? So with an empty gun, if you see another threat, it's not really going to help you, right? So reload your gun and then continue your assessment, right? So lateral movement and assessment are two of the main things that we do that allow us to be defensive efficient. Let me see. A really good contributor to not looking like a threat when we do our assessment is to do our assessment from the high compressed rate, right? We talked a little bit about that. This is our ready position, right? The elbows are by the ribs, right? My forearm are in contact with my ribs too. The gun is between my nipples, if you will, in front of my sternum, right? So this has a few benefits, right? This is where we are the strongest, right? That's where we open our jars, right? This is where we are the most dexterous, when we fix glasses and stuff, we're right here. On top of it, especially in a public environment, this is going to be easier to defend my gun if somebody else wants to try to grab me than if my gun was in the low or the high rate, right? And it's congruent with our presentation from the holster, because now, from here, right, I move laterally if I see another threat, and the gun travels in just one plane of motion, right? It doesn't swing up and then out. It doesn't swing down and then out, right? And when I'm assessing a situation, right, I'm going to show you how it's going to look to you, right? So I engage the bad guy here. Now I'm assessing my situation like this, as opposed to like this, right? Which one do you think is going to get you shot less often? I venture the one from the high compressed rate, right? You may get a drop the gun instead of just a straight up bullet. So consider that and try to integrate that into your training so that if you ever are called upon using a gun, you can actually not become more of a liability to yourself after the engagement is done.
So Al, we're dropping people like flies. I think we might be nearing the end of our time. We can have a follow-up class. We've got another class scheduled next week for defensive carbine, and then one after that for the counter ambush methodology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you're good, I think they're good. There might be a couple of follow-up questions here. We'll go ahead and open the floor for the occasional question, but be mindful it's now 20 minutes past the hour, so folks want to get back to doing I don't know, Netflix or something, right? It's the pandemic, and I got to go watch Bad Boys 2.
Al, there was a question about the unique situation with appendix carry and with striker-fired pistols. Are there special considerations? Is that an advanced carry method? What are your thoughts on that?
As long as you have a solid holster, right, that covers the trigger guard, we basically modify presentation from the holster with appendix to make it safer, and it looks like this, right? So you're reacting to the threat, right? When you go to grab your gun, right, from here, you push your hips out so that when you grab the gun comes out, there is no muzzle any on your parts, right? And now you're in, and you achieve your stance as you go through a stand touch press, right? You finish the engagement, you assess, and when you reholster, right, again, you look the gun back into the holster. You push your hip forward, look the gun back into the holster, and now you're good to go. So we modify the draw a little bit to make sure that we err on the side of caution, and we implement a mechanical way that allows it to be safer, right? Because I definitely, like, if I'm here bending forward and I'm drawing this gun, it's gonna muzzle, myself, and apart from the obvious, reproductive organs, you got the femoral artery right there, right? So it's not really a good spot to get a negligent discharge. So by integrating those two little modification, right? Hips forward when you draw, hips forward when you bring the gun back, and as always, loop the gun back into the holster, right? There's nothing more compelling. The threat is taken care of, right? There's no more threats and so on. I don't want to end up shooting myself when I just shot the bad guy, right? So I'm looking the gun. Now the gun is the most dangerous thing around. I want to make sure that I put it in my holster safely, right? There's a lot of stuff that can come in, get caught into the holster, and cause an accident.
I'd add two things there. One, if you're going to appendix carry, get some instruction from somebody who does it, so they can help you train through that, and then train the hell out of it. And two, the folks in this particular class aren't operators, so there's no reason for anybody to need to put their gun away without looking at their holster. All right. If the threat is still active, the gun stays out. If the threat ain't active, don't shoot yourself in the damn leg.
Exactly. And even if you're an operator, look the gun back into the holster.
Look the gun back in the holster for the most part. Unless you're a Marine. I've got a Marine major who absolutely yells at you if you don't just put it away without looking. So.
I was alive in 1980 as well. I just chose to evolve from there.
All right. Well, thank you, folks. And Al, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. Let's do that. Can I do that? Unmute all. Everybody say thanks.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
That was awesome, man.
Thank you.
Say Beretta.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, you got to say Beretta. I got to mute everybody. Beretta. I muted you too. Hold on. There you go. Now you can do it.
Beretta. Buona beretta a tutti.
All right, folks. I think that's going to become the signature. He might be the Beretta doctor. How about that? No, don't want the Beretta. No. Anyway, so we might have an online competition and name Al's classes, because we got the bench doctor. He's coming on tomorrow to talk about rifles. We got a Stop the Bleed class from Lonnie on Thursday, and then there's a follow-up class to this next Monday, same time, same channel. It's probably a slightly different URL, but I'm not entirely sure. Where Al's going to walk us through defensive carbine. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Outstanding.
And if it's easier to do it either later or sooner, you let me know, because I'm pretty flexible.
We're going to keep the time. This seems to get a good participation. We still have 45 people on, and it's only dropped by 15. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Wash your hands. Stay indoors. Do all the things you're supposed to do. And we'll see you next. We'll see some of you tomorrow. See some of you on Thursday, and the rest of you we'll see next week.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.